I teach therapeutic aspects of therapeutic yoga, which is using yoga as therapy. So it's pretty much no vinyasa flow. I don't teach to music. I have no playlist. We go slow, we go mindful. We break poses down into small increments to study different actions to help unwind ingrained habits that you may have in your posture or your movement pattern, you know. So in general, that's a therapeutic view of yoga. It's like looking at the whole person, listening to what their goals are, looking to see what their posture might tell us about how they use their body. And in conversation, we might find something about their emotional or psychological posture that may be impacting whatever's going on in their body. So it's called, under a heading, it's called Vini Yoga, V-I-N-I, Vini Yoga. And that's really where all my studies and training and teaching have, you know, taken place, is in that arena. So if yoga asana is a small slice of what yoga offers, then what I do is a small slice of yoga asana, you know? So I want you to keep that in mind as we, you know, do what we do, you know, today. Could I ask you just to kind of, you know, clear some space if you can, and pile things, and because I'm going to be walking around and you're going to be lying down with your arms out and doing things, so we won't need a bolster, we won't need any blocks. We won't need a strap, maybe a blanket to be comfortable. And that just clears up the space, and when we clear up our spatial clutter, we help to clear up the clutter in our attention. You know what I mean? Get rid of distraction. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah? Okay. So just waiting for everyone to settle. What a fine example you are. Sitting at the front, ready to go. Sitting up straight, ready to go.
Always.
So one of my primary teachers is Adil Prakavala, and he's a senior Iyengar teacher. He's one of the best teachers in the world, up in Northwest Washington State. He teaches around the world. He comes into a room, there might be 100 people there, and he'll walk slowly, quietly down the front of the room, and he'll take his seat and he'll just sit there. He doesn't have anyone introduce him. You just sit there. And there's chatter, and there's talk, and there's chatter, and there's talk, and he just sits there smiling, just waiting for everybody to come to attention, you know? Because he feels that if you're in a conversation that it must be really important, so he doesn't want to intrude on your conversation, so he'll just wait patiently. It's never worked for me. I always need a bell. But he has a certain presence that, you know, emanates, you know? Okay, so this thing called the breath, that's what we're here for, right? The breath. Let's distinguish that from pranayama. You're going to have pranayama teachers later, right? Yeah, so that's not me, right? That's not me. But I have a notion that most of us, not all, but pretty much the vast majority of us, even in this room, have inhibitions in their natural capacity to breathe. Just to breathe in a global fashion, to be free, to be open, for ribs to open, for the back to expand, for the chest to lift, for the belly to rise and fall. I think pretty much everybody has restrictions in that, you know, of one kind or another. And I feel that it's really useful to get into basic breathing patterns and what those are, and clear any old residue of gripping and protecting and, tightness due to slumping posture through sports, through whatever you might do, right? So if we can clear all that out and be consciously elastic and expansive and know how and where we're breathing, then we're in a good place to learn pranayama. Because trying to learn the more complex pranayama approaches when you're already in a restricted habitual pattern of breathing is just piling one pile of stuff on a pile of stuff that's already there, So this might seem very simple in what we do, but I think that we'll all find some benefit in the doing of it. So, is that kind of okay? So I want to spend just a little bit on anatomy. Last time I was here there was a little skeleton. Is that not around? Okay, I'll bring one next week. So do we all have a basic understanding of the rib cage? So I'm just going to go basic muscles of anatomy. There is a test for this, and I have the questions right there. So at some point through this thing I will be answering those questions on that test. I usually tell people this is on the test because, why not? So anyway, we have a rib cage, yes? Yes. We have, thank you for that, validation. Inside that cage, we have two lungs that are either side of a heart. And they sit on the dome of the diaphragm, yes? And the diaphragm is a muscle, like a parachute, like a mushroom, that kind of shape. The diaphragm is the most primary of all your breathing muscles. And that one muscle, as thin as it is, that one muscle is the only muscle in your body that has never ever stopped working from the moment you were born. And it will only stop working at the moment you die. So it's the only muscle you have that's constantly in use. And it's responsible for 75% of your capacity to expand and shrink, to pull in air and to release air, 75%. So it would seem like a good idea to have a strong, functioning, supple, intelligent diaphragm. Does it seem in any way odd that I use those words to describe a muscle? Good. Because muscles grow in intelligence and suppleness and strength and capacity to listen and produce whatever you want of them. It's just a question of how deep and long the relationship has been between, neuromuscular connection, right? Yeah. So there's the diaphragm sitting pretty like that. And you know how on an umbrella you get those wire plates that, go down inside that give it structure, And there's a top of the umbrella like that, a circle at the top. That could be like a simplistic way of describing the diaphragm. The diaphragm's got more convoluted base, it's not round. Instead of one circle at the top, it's got like a little clover leaf thing. But if you understand it as a circular tendon on the top that spreads out like an umbrella and attaches to the underside, inside of your entire rib cage, all the way around, front to back, that's the structure of it right there. It's a muscle, so it has an origin and an insertion. All muscles can work from the origin and pull the insertion to them, or the insertion can be fixed and pull the origin towards the insertion. They move in both directions. It's obvious, right? Same thing for the diaphragm. So one way that a diaphragm contracts is that the ribs are pretty fixed, and when the muscle contracts, it pulls the top of the diaphragm down, right? So the top, it becomes flatter. And in the pulling down of the diaphragm, what sits right above it are the two lungs. And there's a fascial connection at the base of each lung to the top of the diaphragm. You know what fascia is? That which covers everything in our body and penetrates everything in our body. And do we get that? So like, okay, I'm seeing, maybe not everybody gets it. So a real quick visual of that would be, have you peeled an orange? You peel an orange and there's that white pithy stuff around the orange, right? That's fascia. That's pretty thick fascia, and it's keeping the whole thing together. But if you tear that apart and you take one slice of that orange, that too is covered in fascia, right? It's got a skin around it that separates it from the other segments, yeah? When you snap that in half and look in at the end, at the orange end, what do you see? See little globules of juice? And each one of those is surrounded by fascia, yeah. So it penetrates everything, it surrounds everything, and it separates everything. And when it comes to separating muscles, usually the fascia is really slick, so muscles glide and move around and they're independently available, right? Rather than stuck to each other. So anyway, there's this fascia at the bottom of the lungs that sticks to the top of the diaphragm. So when the diaphragm dives down on the inhale, it pulls the bottom of the lungs down. And that creates air, a vacuum for the air to come in, right? So the lungs are not muscular tissue at all. They are limp. They cannot have any expression in and of themselves. They're like a limp balloon. The only way they work is when the diaphragm comes down, pulled down, air comes into the vacuum and they expand, right? This fascia is not just at the bottom of the lungs. It's also the back of the lung connecting to the back ribs, the side of the lung connecting to the side ribs, the front of the lung connecting to the front ribs. It's a very simple thing. But so when you move the diaphragm, when you use the intercostal muscles that are between the ribs, you're pulling the diaphragm down, so the lung is pulled down, it's pulled forward, it's pulled back, and it's pulled sideways. It blows up in a global fashion. Really important to understand the global nature of the breath, right? We're usually front-oriented, you know, just front-oriented. So through this fascial system, we create that breath. On the underside, what's interesting, on the underside of the diaphragm, the liver and the stomach are fascially connected to the underside of the diaphragm. So as the diaphragm goes down, it pushes the belly out, and we call that belly breathing, right? Yeah. So that's how that happens. It pushes down. All this watery, juicy stuff in here has to be compressed and pushed out of the way. That's belly breathing. As that happens, the whole content of your core, all of your intestines, all of your organs, they're all gently pressed downward. And if you're relaxed, especially if you're lying down, you can feel that downward pressure to the next diaphragm, which is at the base of the pelvis. We all know there's a diaphragm there, right? Base of pelvic diaphragm. So we get this kind of shunting movement that when the body is open and free, we should feel it from the top of the lungs all the way to the pelvic floor. We feel the downward movement and we feel the return movement. Unless, of course, we're holding, gripping, have had surgery, you know, scar tissue, you know, whatever. We collect impediments to free movement as we get older and have more experiences. You know what I mean? Okay, so that's all happening. So, I believe firmly that yoga is not an intellectual exercise by any means. And if you're a serious thinker, if you like to really ponder and go deep and think and read, you will struggle in your yoga. Because you will always think that thinking about it will make it better. The only thing that makes yoga better is practicing yoga. Do it, do it, do it, don't think it. Do it, don't think it. Right, so we're all going to stand up. And we're going to let's make a couple of conga lines. Yeah, a conga line.
All right.
Just a long line. So here, this is a likely looking line right down here behind this lovely blonde lady. Yes.
Heidi.
Heidi.
Just kidding, Hildy.
Hildy. So if you would look that way and everyone stand behind her in this line, and then if you create a second line along there, let's stand off in a space. And that's why I asked you to clear space, right? So let's all fit in these two lines right here. So, Hilda? Mm-hmm. Yes. Would you volunteer for me?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So, fingertips slightly on the side of the ribs. So just reach forward to not yours, the person in front. It's a conga line, you know? Yeah, so fingertips lightly on the side of the low ribs. Yes? Okay. And breathe. So, you breathe in. So you're trying to breathe in a way that pushes their hands apart. And the person behind you senses, is that moving or not? Can you feel the person's ribs moving in and out? Yeah, stand in line here so this lady here can get a sense. And you can, so a bit higher. So. So if you can't feel any movement, you need to, just tap that person. Say, no, it's not happening. It's not happening, right? Now, the other really important muscles that allow this movement to be more obvious is your core muscles, your abdominals. So now what I want you to do is to draw your corset in. I guess you guys call it a Spanx nowadays, right? So imagine you're drawing your Spanx in, and can you hold it in? No, not like that, but just tone it, and then see if you don't sense that your ribs can move in a more obvious way when you're toning your core. Can we see that? Can we all feel that? So I'm going to stand right there. Mm-hmm. The more successful you are at holding your core in, the more your ribs will move. Okay, you know what that is? So I talked about the diaphragm moving down as one movement of the diaphragm, and in that movement, the belly, look at that belly. The belly grows big, right? That's that movement. But the other movement of the diaphragm is that the top tendon of the diaphragm can stay exactly where it is and pull the edges up towards it, right? A muscle works in both directions, origin to insertion, insertion to origin, right? So here, if I tone my corset and I can get this pretty big movement as the ribs flare up and out towards the top of the diaphragm, yes? Good, okay. So now we're going to partner up. So now we're going to do this. You stay right there. I want you to lay a hand very gently just on the upper sternum and the other just around middle back, like that. So just pair up, one in front of the other, one in front of the other. Yeah. Yeah. So one right there and one in the back. Yep. So, okay, now let's be quiet. So, yeah, turn sideways to your partner. So one hand here, and then the other hand here. Yes. So, one hand on the front, one hand on the back. No, the whole hand. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. So, let's focus. Quit talking. You can't feel anything if you're talking. So you know what I said about thinking? It's not a thinking. If you're talking, that's an expression of thinking, right? So you can't feel what's going on if you're thinking or talking. So just feel. Just breathe normal and see what you feel. Just breathe normal. Let your belly go if you want to. And if you let your belly breathe, you won't feel any kind of movement up there, right? Now tone the belly. Draw it in, draw it up, and keep it in and up. Now take a deep breath. Now, while you're trying to move those two hands, the person whose hands they are trying to move two imaginary hands, plus the two hands that were on the sides of your ribs. So I want you to feel like you've got 4 hands on your rib cage. And I want you to move all 4. Oh yeah, now it's moving. Remember what I said about the lungs being pulled into the back ribs, front ribs, side ribs, fascially? That's what we're doing. And the more you contain your core, the more you will get movement elsewhere. Good, and then change partners. Just turn around, do the other thing. So I want you to stay with this. I want you to close your eyes. Let's close your eyes. So really focus. This isn't an intellectual exercise. You know how a doctor goes quiet when they listen to a stethoscope? You have to pay attention to the breath. As you feel movement under your hands, create that movement in your own body. If you're not feeling movement, tap their body. Give them something to focus on. Give them a place to breathe into. We're going to do this for a little bit. And this is called breathing globally. The whole rib cage expands outward in all directions. Nothing to do with your neck, right? Shoulders just hanging, heavy, relaxed. But if you're really into this, you'll feel that your shoulders rise and fall on your expanding rib cage, right? Feel it all moving. Now, drop your belly, let your belly completely relax, and then see if you're still feeling any movement. Yeah, and then release. Good. Good. So, close your eyes and feel again those hands in those 4 places. Just close your eyes. Breathing is always an inner experience. You don't need to open your eyes to feel it. Where do you feel it the most? Don't answer me, but just notice. Where do you feel it the most? Where do you feel it the least? And could you bring balance to that? Could you breathe and expand in all directions? And really enjoy the outward movement, the return movement, all the time keeping the core somewhat engaged. Let's take 2 more breaths like that. Good. And release. Good. So the primary muscle is diaphragm. Other primary muscles would be intercostals. Have you heard what intercostals are? Anyone ever eaten ribs? You're eating the intercostals of a cow or a pig. That's what you're eating. There's I eat meat. I'm not laying any trip here. So anyway, well, you know, sorry, but it's nice to know, right? When you eat tenderloin, you're eating the psoas, the cow's psoas. Well, that's what you're eating. So just strange facts that you might enjoy knowing. So between the ribs, there are 2 layers of muscles. One's called the inner, one the outer. Do that. They're what's working when you feel that global nature of the breath. The diaphragm and the intercostals moving, right? So those muscles are both present on your inhale and on your exhale. Diaphragm, intercostals. Your abdominal muscles, your six-pack, your obliques, and beneath it your corset, all those are muscles of expiration, exhaling, right? They squeeze, they empty, right? So they're only there for the exhale, you know, when it comes to the breath. The secondary muscles of the breath, all this is on the test, primary muscles, secondary muscles on the test. Secondary muscles are all these up here, right? They're connected to the first, second, third rib. Your pec minor comes from the shoulder blade to the rib, your serratus, your scalenes, your sternocleidomastoid muscle, these things, they're all connected up here. These are secondary muscles. These kick in when you really exert yourself, when you run, right? So you're running and you're getting tired and you want to go faster, you need to fill up all three lobes of the lung. So the diaphragm can be working, the intercostals can be working, but we need more. So we do this. We all familiar with that kind of breath, right? It literally pulls the top of the chest up. Some people live a life or have had a life where they are very tense and, you know, protected, and they've forgotten how to breathe down here, and they always use their secondary muscles rather than their primary muscles. And this, if you see this in a student, you have to address it. You just have to. So if I'm here, and you say, take a deep belly breath, instead of seeing this, you'll say a deep belly breath and you'll see this. And this is pulled up, the belly is pulled in, the diaphragm is now rigid and stuck, and then the exhale is completely backwards. Completely backwards. If you have this, if you're stuck in this pattern of breathing, you need to notice it and really start to practice. It's prodigious, isn't it? That for a skinny guy. It's because it's flexible. It's not because it's fat, it's because it's flexible. So, let's lie down. Lie down on your mat. So just take your Shavasana position. Get comfortable, be open, and then just take a deep, or a series of deep belly breaths. So you remember how we pulled the belly in to isolate the breath into the cage? Well, now there's a subtle action of kind of a gentle resistance of the ribs moving and putting all the movement in and out of the belly. Now, sometimes we are not used to listening to messages from the belly and can't clearly feel them, understand them. So put your fingertips on your belly. Lay your hands on your belly, one above the other. So like one's below the navel, one's above the navel. Breathe into the hands. Which hand moves first and most? The upper hand or the lower hand? Remember our purpose here. We're just trying to find a free and clear body that breathes very easily in a very elastic and welcoming way. So you notice if this is a challenge for you. Now let's see if we can begin the expansion in the low hand, bring it up to the upper hand, Feel the sides of the ribs open. Feel the corners of the chest rise. Feel the armpits expand. And feel even the back of the ribs expanding into the floor. I want you to breathe globally. And if this is all open, do you sense that as the breath moves all the way down into the pit of the belly, that it can actually be felt lifting the groin and pressing down into the pelvic diaphragm? So you can't jump ahead here, you've got to get the belly moving first, and then see if it can cross the groin and you can inflate the front of the hips. If it will go into the pelvic floor, armpits and back. So it's a deep breath now, it's a muscular breath, but there's no desperateness involved. It's just a slow, full, complete inhalation. Once you got it moving down there, begin the breath down there, but complete it all the way up in the corners of the chest, underneath the collarbones. Still feeling your friend's hands on the sides, on your chest, on your back. So again, I suggest if this is challenging, if this is not happening for you, then perhaps it might be something to play with consciously every day a little bit. Good. Let's take 2 or 3 more breath cycles. Good. And then release. And just roll gently over and sit up. So why would we be interested in manipulating the breath? Because it's obvious we can manipulate the breath, right? Why would we want to do that? Mm-hmm. Just because it's there.
Strengthen the muscles.
Yeah, strengthen the muscles would be one way. The more strength your breathing muscles are, right, the more powerfully you can breathe when you need to.
Hold the poses longer when we're about to give out.
Yeah, controlling the breath, breathing, having strong respiratory system allows you to hold a pose longer. Remember, this is the corset here, is your major stabilizing muscle in your body. This transverse abdominis, it's called. It's the deepest of all your belly muscles. You know, six-pack, obliques, inner and outer, and then beneath that there's the corset. The corset is the only one attached to your low back. It helps you draw in and engage the spine upward rather than downward. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think one of the primary reasons we want to be able to step in and manipulate, regulate our breath work is to control our emotional content. You know? What happens when you...
Change your brain.
Change your breathing, change your brain, sure. Yeah. Through the breath, what happens when we get emotionally upset? Breath shortens, we breathe faster, right? More shallow. Belly's certainly not moving, is it? It's all up here, you know, we're turned on. And, you know, when we go in that direction, you can be breathing 20, 25 times a minute easily. And if you slip into, you know, serious breathing towards like panic attack, you can be breathing 30 35 times a minute. I mean, it's just panting really quick. And we know that that's not a healthy thing, right? I mean, hypertension is the biggest killer in this country, and that kind of breathing is, you know, promoting hypertension. So what if we could bring our breath down from 30 through 20, through 15, through 10, through 8, 6, 4, 2 breaths a minute? What would happen physiologically? Yeah.
Heart rate lowers.
Heart rate lowers, blood pressure drops, right? You've totally shifted which side of the nervous system you're living in. You know, we have a sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, and we have parasympathetic, which is the relaxation, rest and digest side of your nervous system, right? Sometimes we can find ourselves on the sympathetic side, you know, meaning fight, flight oriented. That can be produced by events, circumstances, or it can just be produced by, you know, obsessive compulsive worrying. Who has not done that? You've never obsessively compulsively worried?
She's an overachiever.
She is an overachiever. So wouldn't it be useful if we had some skill and some immediate way to affect our inner state, our heart rate, our blood pressure, our state of mind, the energy in which all of our organs are trying to function, you know? Do we think more clearly when we're agitated and stressed? No, we don't. So even the clarity of our thinking improves when we slow down our breath, right? Yeah. So I said I wasn't going to get into any pranayama, you know, breath work here, but there is a breath that I teach everybody that I feel everybody should know, whether they're a yogi or not, and it's the Ujjayi breath. Are we familiar with Ujjayi breath? Yes. The breath that has the sound, right? So mostly I see this translated as victory breath. I've made up my own translation because, you know, I don't care. And I call it the ocean breath. Because immediately you say that, there's like, oh, yeah, I see that, why it would be called that, right? So do we all know how to make that sound? So close your eyes, close your mouth, and make that sound. So you're on a tropical beach somewhere, yeah? And the sound of the wave coming in, and the sound of the wave going out. Okay, so how are you making that sound? What are you doing to make that sound?
Your tongue is restricting the back of your throat. And your mouth is closed.
Close, close. Yeah, it's right there. This little thing called the glottis, right there. The windpipe passes through, right? I can take a full breath and I can get rid of it in a second. Or you can take a full breath and you can make that breath last a lot longer by slowing down its passage through the windpipe, right? It's pretty simple. If you narrow the windpipe, the breath slows down. So there's your control, right there. To try to move into an area where you're breathing 6 times a minute, 4 times a minute, 3 times a minute, this is essential to reaching that kind of level of breathing. Could we see how that would be? You know? The same action is available on the in-breath. I'm going to keep my mouth open so you can hear me, but So it's not difficult to bring yourself down to 6 breaths a minute, right? So what would one breath be at 6 breaths a minute? 10 seconds, yes, we have a math whiz in class. Yeah, so a 10-second breath, right? That's not a big deal. I'm talking about inhale, pause, exhale, pause. All those add up to 10 seconds. And you're breathing 6 times a minute. If you can inhale for 4 and exhale for 6, that's 6 times a minute. If you can inhale for 4 and pause for 3 or for 2, and then exhale for the 6, and then pause at the bottom for 3, 15. It's 15. Now you're breathing 4 times a minute, right? So this isn't a race, right? It's not a competition. You can't force it. Because if you try too hard, you think, okay, I'm really going to go for it. I'm going to exhale for 30 seconds. Well, probably, if we really tried, I could exhale for 30 seconds, but then I'd have to go. So it's not sustainable, right? So you only own a certain ratio if it's sustainable for 5 full minutes. 5 full minutes. If you can sustain those ratios for that long with ease, without strain or struggle, without resistance, then you own it. And then you might start to maybe push out a little to go from a 15-second breath to a 20-second breath. And then you would be breathing 3 times a minute, right? 60 seconds in a minute, you know? So you see where we're heading here, right? Yeah. Now, are the numbers important? Because I've already said I don't want you to be thinking, you know. But at first, thinking numbers is better than random thinking, because at least it's focused, you know. But once you've done this kind of thing for 6 months, a year, we're really looking long term here, right? You can forget all the numbers, you know, and you just feel it. It doesn't matter if one breath is 5 seconds shorter or longer than the next breath. It's not about the numbers. It's about the feeling, the experience. It's about dropping into yourself through the medium of your breath, consciously having this skill that you can apply anytime you want to in order to chill, you know? When you're feeling this, when you're doing this and feeling this, what are you not doing? Thinking, yes. And thinking is the driver of all your angst, right? The worry, the churning, the middle of the night, what ifs and shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? All totally useless, totally never leads anywhere, you know? So why do we do it? Well, we're habituated to it. We all do it, right? We get lost in these thoughts. So your breath is the key. The breath is the tool. And you can just say, I'm not thinking this anymore. I'm just going to listen to this sound. And you listen to the sound. And you're interested in the quality of the sound, the sustainability of its rhythm. You're interested in it. You're observing it. You're perceiving it. What you're not doing is thinking about it. So it's perception without any commentary. The breath gives you an anchor for your attention. This is so important. So important it's on the test. The breath gives you the anchor for your attention. One of your senses, your auditory sense, is completely locked on the quality of that sound, right? You have a sense of touch. You feel the breath moving through your throat as you close the throat in order to make the sound, right? So now you've got your sense of, your auditory sense, you've got your sense of touch, both deeply focused on the movement of breath. Each time you inhale through the nose, you cannot not notice if there is any kind of scent or aroma on the air that you're inhaling. You perceive it. You don't have to identify it, you don't have to think about it, it's just right there in your experience, right? So now your sense of smell is also focused on the breath. And even your sense of taste can be triggered by the smell of the breath. I mean, dryer sheets. You know, you smell someone's dryer sheets when you walk in the neighborhood. You know what dryer sheets are, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh, and it's, yeah, it's kind of cloying. You know, it's cloying on the back of your throat, right? So there's a possibility here where 4 of your 5 senses could be totally located on your breath. And all you need to do is shut your eyes and your visual sense is turned off, right? So not only is it a way to deal with your inner psychological, emotional stuff that you can flip to your relax and digest side of your nervous system, but it also keeps you out of thinking. Thinking is overrated, and 95% of it is absolutely unnecessary. It's repetitive, it's circular, it's reinforcing, and it just never leads anywhere. Deepak Chopra once said that 95% of the thoughts that you have today, you had last week, you had a month ago, you had a year ago. Same stuff, churn around. The expression of an original thought to you, to each individual, not, you know, you're not Einstein, right? But just an original thought for you, a new perspective, a new understanding, is rare because the mind is cluttered by all of this unnecessary, habitual, compulsive thinking. You're thinking about that now, aren't you? Yeah. Yeah. Is that true? Could that be true? I'll have to think about that some more, right? Why would you want to do that? Why not just breathe, right? Because this thing wants to move all the time. It wants to, all the time. It wants to have an opinion. And the very first thing in you know, I forget where it comes from, is yoga is the cessation, what is it? The cessation, fluctuations of the mind. To cease the fluctuations of the mind. Thank you very much. Because there's a recognition that 90% of your suffering is because of the fluctuations of your mind. So if you want to reduce 90% of your suffering, quit thinking and learn to focus on this sound. It's there all the time, anytime. It's not just a yoga breath. It's a driving down the road breath. It's a walking across the street breath. It's a pushing the car up the aisle breath. It's waiting in line at the bank for 20 minutes, and instead of getting uppity and frustrated, you just practice breathing. And then you've had a 20-minute opportunity, not a 20-minute delay, right? Can't stress this enough. I mean, if there's one thing you can take from all of your yoga information, it's this about the breath, Ujjayi breath. You can use it when, instead of getting an injection for a filling. I've had 2 fillings without injections, just saying, hey, give me a couple of minutes to just focus and relax. Because what do you do when the guy comes in? Right? It's all resistance. If you can let go of your resistance, there's less suffering. If you let go of your mental resistance to a person, to a situation, to an event, there's less suffering, you know. And you can't think yourself out of that, but you can breathe yourself out of that.
You actually had the feelings completely done, no rejections.
Yes. Yes. About 10 years ago. I mean, they weren't root canals. Jeez. I'm not stupid. and it was a test, you know, because I thought, well, you know, he can wait 5 minutes, he can give me a shot in 5 minutes if it doesn't work, right? But I wanted to know, you know. And all the pain and suffering that comes from challenging situations in your life can be minimized and reduced just by checking into the global nature of your breath. Every situation, every circumstance, every meeting, every interview, you know, it can all be reduced and mitigated through this global nature of your breath. So simple. I mean, really, you're breathing anyway. And it's free, right? It's free, you're doing it anyway. Why not just be better at it, you know? Why not consciously be able to step in and control it, you know, to your advantage, right? So another simple way to do that is that if you're kind of lethargic and you want energy, then you should up your in-breath so your in-breath is twice as long as your out-breath. If you want to go down, if you want to relax, if you want to take 10 minutes to chill, then make your exhale twice as long as your inhale. I mean, it's that simple. But it directly affects your nervous system and shifts your whole inner landscape to a better place. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Okay then. Let me look at the questions so I make sure I'm covering them. Oh yeah, okay. So diaphragm, go back to diaphragm. We want a strong diaphragm, right? So we could breathe in and out strongly. I mean, that helps, right? But what do we do if we want to strengthen a bicep? We use a weight, don't we? We use a weight. So everyone lay down on their belly. And there's your weight. Just want to lay down on your belly. We're going to bring the hands to Cobra position, either side of your rib cage. So, hands either side of the ribs, shoulders roll back, elbows tuck in, and just inhale up, exhale down, just a few times. Just warming up your spine is all we want to do. You're not trying to impress anybody, least of all me. Yeah. So when we come up, just as an aside, nothing to do with the breath, don't let the chin lead the way up. Tuck the chin just a tad. Let your heart come forward and up. Good. Now, lift your hands an inch from the floor. Inhale into your belly. So no hands on the floor now. Are you moving? As you inhale and exhale, are you rising? Are you descending as you breathe? If not, you're holding yourself really rigid. I want you to take a big muscular breath into your soft belly. It will push down on the floor and it will lift you up a little bit. You feel that?
Yes.
Anybody not feeling that? Don't be shy. So what's the diaphragm doing here?
Strengthening.
Yeah, it's bench pressing your upper body weight off the floor. So sit up where you can see me for a minute. So, you know, if I use my arms, I can come up, but I just want to use my spine, and that's my spine and my back muscles lifting my chest from the floor. If I'm really rigid, I can breathe, and there's not much movement, but I am breathing. But if I consciously breathe into the belly, so the diaphragm is trying to go down, but all of your body weight is pushed onto the floor. So that which the diaphragm wants to move out of the way is compressed onto the floor. And the only way you can really move is to rise up away from the floor. So you get that the diaphragm on its own there is really working to lift your weight up and then lower it back down. even as your back remains in a steady place of effort. Does that make sense? Let's do that one more time. Let's take your hands behind you and interlock your fingers and squeeze your shoulder blades together. Now, try to relax the front body as you engage the back body, and breathe deep as you come up. Now, hold yourself up with your spine, but rock up and down as your belly expands and condenses. So we can isolate the diaphragm in this version of locust pose. Now, if there's no movement at all, either the diaphragm is pretty weak, or you're holding a lot of tension and rigidity in the rest of your body, and it won't rise up that freely. Good. And release. And push up. Yeah, just come on up. So, just going to revisit this corset muscle. Anatomically, the superficial six-pack here comes from your heart to your pubis. And when it contracts, it pulls one end towards the other end, and we go into flexion, right? The obliques, if they work together, they also enhance that movement. Your corset, however, just squeezes and narrows your waist. You actually get taller rather than hunched over when you engage the corset, right? I completely lost my train of thought. Give me a moment. It's not the first time. Yes. So, as I alluded to earlier, this corset muscle is our major source of stability in the body. It's a coming into center from all sides, from the front, from the back, from the side, right? So it narrows and it lifts and it supports. It provides stability. I can isolate that muscle if I come onto all fours. So I'm presenting my natural shape in my spine. So I have a cervical curve, a thoracic curve, and a lumbar curve. Yes? Is that true? Yes. Okay. So if I was to use the six-pack or the obliques and contract them, they would take me up in towards a cat position, right? Because that's what they do. But if I just engage my corset, you see anything else moving? Spine's not moving. Tailbone's not moving. Because I've successfully isolated that corset muscle. Let's do that. So, push down a little with the arms so you've got broad shoulders, and lift your sacrum up behind you so you have a lumbar curve. Now, feel the shape of that spine. You don't want it to move at all. Inhale, drop your belly toward the floor. So let that drop into your body more so you've got a lumbar curve. There you go. But keep that up and this down. So the spine between the shoulders is up and the spine in the low back is down. Exhale, drop the belly, make it big and round and full. Exhale, pick it up and squeeze the waist. Squeeze the waist. Let's just drop that. Yeah, there you go. Let's drop that into your body a bit more. Yeah, there you go. There's your lumbar curve. Keep that up, but this down. Yeah, keep that still. Just lift your belly to my hand without lifting my hand. Can you find it? Oh no, you can't find it. You see how you're pushing up on me? Yeah. So you're using your superficial muscles, not your deep corset. So this can be informational, right? If your low back's moving up and down, then you're using something other than your corset muscle.
Is this better?
Yeah, sometimes it takes a little while. Okay, sit back on your heels. So a pose from this position that would greatly improve if we found stability from this corset muscle. So wide there, lift up the sacrum, pull in the belly, and then, so here, if this is working to stabilize me, I need to breathe somewhere else. You slowly transition to the other side. Let's do that. So, come back into the same shaped spine, squeeze your corset, narrow your whole waist, and then lift up your right leg and your left arm. Now, not worried about the arm and leg, right? What we're really focusing on is the capacity to maintain a narrow waist as you breathe in and out of the sides of your ribs. Can you feel your side ribs opening and closing? It's a muscular breath. You have to make it happen while you're holding your belly strong. Change sides whenever you want to. So we're just looking for that moment when the belly is stable, the breath is in the ribs, and the pose becomes balanced and still. Good. How's that? And release. Yeah. So we're not doing a practice, right? We're just exploring different aspects of, different challenges. So could we sense that this is a stabilizer? Yeah? Okay. So another one of my opinions is that most of us, when confronted by a challenging situation or event, even a difficult conversation, whatever, our go-to reaction is to just hold the breath. You noticed how often you hold the breath? Sometimes because you've been scared, but other times just because something's going on in here that makes you feel this way, contract, right? Take a deep breath. Take a global breath. Draw your tummy in, breathe globally. Just how quickly can you drop into that? And how freely does it respond? Good. So, imagine an event or a circumstance where instead of just holding your breath, you just drew your core in and you kept breathing. So the minute you drew your core in, you're like, okay, something's going on here, but I'm going to breathe. I'm going to breathe through it. I feel certain emotions, fine. Whatever they are, fine. I don't care what they are. They're there, so they're already there, so you have to move them through. Holding your breath as your emotions build in intensity creates, negativity, right? Feeling the emotion and channeling it through your breath is smart. It's an intelligent response to the arising emotion. You don't want to hold on to it. You certainly don't want to suppress it, repress it, but you don't want to act on it either, right? But you want to move it through. And learning how to stabilize and be ready for whatever might need to be done from here, rather than holding your breath, is a more optimal way to go through your life. And it's only a shift. It takes a while to let go of one habit and install another habit, but through your practice, through all the poses that you can do where you're engaging this for stability, you come to see, hey, when the pose gets really challenging, I need to breathe, but I also need to be stable, right? So, let's stand up. We're going to stand on one leg. So, what do we need to be stable on one leg? One leg, right? And the more we can intelligently gather up that leg, we're going to cover the lower body in a later Friday, right? We got this for the breath, next week is the spine, and then sometime in November I've got you twice again for lower body and upper body. But when I come back for the spine, this is going to be, we're going to be doing the spine with what we're doing today, right? So it's all going to add one on top of the other. So shift to your left leg. Now I could shift and drop into my hip, or I could shift and push down and come up. Bring in your corset. Relax your shoulders and float your knee. Now, are we breathing? Could our breath be a little more conscious? And could we give it direction? Could we squeeze the corset and expand the cage? Can you feel the back of your ribs? Don't open the front by squeezing the back. Open it all. Front, back, and side. And focus on the sound, the ocean sound of a steady breath. The effort continues to deepen, but the attention is on the breath. So the pose is perceived as more spacious and effortless because that's where your focus is. Good. And release. Yeah. Good. So everyone be able to pull that in and hold that there like that. Okay, second leg, shift. Come up. So that action of squeezing gives us length, right? It's the 7th movement of the spine. That's on next week's test. So, imagine someone's just tightened your corset up a notch. And you have to breathe a little more fully in the cage. Top of the chest, middle of the back, under the armpits. And every exhale is an opportunity to go a little deeper into the contracting waist. Good. And release. So to choose to respond to a situation or an event or a yoga pose by stabilizing here and allowing the breath to continue, we remain at ease in a challenging situation, right? If we become immediately rigid, not only does our physical musculoskeletal body just, shut down, everything shuts down. Breath shuts down, mind shuts down, and then if we do need to do anything, it always comes from an habitual reaction. It doesn't come from a chosen response, So by focusing on a strong core and a steady global breath, we can take that second or two in order to choose a response that might be very different from your past habitually conditioned responses to that situation. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let's come to all fours. So let the knees go back some. I'd like you to do downward facing dog with your knees on the floor. So your knees stay absolutely vertical, your thighs stay vertical. You walk your hands way forward and lower your forehead, so thighs vertical, like that. There you go. Now walk your hands forward. There you go. See if you can lower your forehead to the floor.
Or what?
Lower the forehead to the floor. So, shoulders are broad, spine is long, chest is heavy. Now, squeeze the corset and breathe exclusively in and out of the cage. The out breath is a squeeze of the ribs. You squeeze the ribs. Inhale, they expand. Exhale, you squeeze. Good. You feel that happening? It's a happening thing? Good. You can come up. So we've found that by squeezing the cage, we can, squeezing the corset, we can expand the cage, right? But we can do a lot more than that. We can give we can give the breath direction and purpose. We can use each breath as a therapeutic tool. So, one example is, you might wake up and it's hard to breathe into your ribs. You've got a catch in your rib. Have we all done that at some point, right? It's difficult to breathe. And usually what we do in that situation is we kind of fold into the discomfort and we say, well, I can't breathe here, and we hope it goes away in the next couple of days, or we take some ibuprofen, which is not a good idea. It's never a good idea. Conversely, we could choose to enter the point of discomfort in a very subtle and singular way. We could test that place's capacity to open to the breath and to diffuse the pain with the breath. So say that's right there for me, right? So, well, even from this position, I could come here, using this hand, push this down here, and reach over. And if I pull my belly in, and I contract here, all the breath is going to go into this side, right? And if I turn a little in or turn a little out, I can give even a more specific landing spot for that breath, right? So some of you are trying it out. It's true, right? You can do that, This is a good thing to know. It gives us a lot more control over dealing with, what life brings, and over time, we start to learn a bunch of little skills, strategies, techniques that we kind of put in a box, and it's like our therapeutic box. And then, we have this happen or that happen, and it's like, well, what have I got in my box to help me with that, So let's do it this way. If I come to all fours again, and I walk my hands around to the right and away, and I pick up the belly, tighten up my right side, and give the breath direction into the left side of your rib cage. So let your thighs come up vertical. Now walk your hands around to your right. Yep. So how far you go, it's up to you. You want to try and lower your head, drop your chest a little bit. Now, physically tighten the right side, as if you're trying to hike up your right hip. And with your belly lifting, breathe deep to the left. And imagine you're aiming for a specific spot. And you could lift a shoulder, drop a shoulder, go into a little twist, just to see that any movement at all, affects where you feel the pose. Good. And come up. And do the other side. Just breathing deep, giving the breath direction, purpose. Patient, steady. And come up when you're ready. Yeah. So the breath, directing the breath can physically reduce, whatever's going on. Just creating the sound of the breath drops us out of thinking and into perceiving, There's so many uses for the breath. I mean, and it's the only system that we can actively step into and manipulate. I mean, if I asked you to, up the function of your kidneys, or make your liver be a little more efficient, or your digestion work more quickly, we don't have any option there, right? But through the breath, we can step into the breath, and in a body that breathes well consistently over time, chronic tension can't exist there. This business, if you really start to work in asana and work with your breath in this way, chronic tension just naturally dissolves. And once you've got rid of the past tension, this consistency of practice doesn't allow new chronic tension to accrue. I think for many of us, we've become like receptacles, like trash compactors, where everything that's happened to us and every disappointment we've had and, all this stuff, and it's all just, we'll push that down into that leg and we'll push that down into that leg, and slowly as you get older and older, you get so full that there's no room for any, creative expression anymore. There's no room for, something new and fresh. It's all just past held in your body, So oftentimes when we begin a practice, it is about slowly clearing all of that out to leave you empty and receptive for what your practice can then actually put in there. That makes sense. You have to empty the trash container, and then fill it in a better way. And your breath can do that. So just as your thoughts and emotions affect the way you breathe, anyone doubt that? Because movies wouldn't work if that wasn't true, right? You wouldn't be scared in a movie if your thoughts weren't affecting your physiological state of being, So we get that direction, but it also works in the other direction. Your physical shape, your posture, affects your mood, your energy, and the quality of your thought. If my posture I'm clapped, compressed. There's no room for breathing here, so that's about it, right? Right? Hours and hours, day after day, we do that, and then we wonder why it's a little difficult to open up. But anyway, my point being is that we can't have a sharp mind, thinking clearly. We can't have a free and easy breath if our posture is in this clap state. And when we keep that clap state as our go-to state, everything becomes more dull. Just more dull. We lose percentage points of efficiency in our organ function. We can still digest, but maybe we're digesting 80% rather than 100%, We're still breathing, but none of these muscles are really getting worked to their full expression. They're just, And if we stay there too long, the fascia that I mentioned earlier says, well, this is your preferred position. We're just going to shrink wrap around this position so you can do it longer with less effort. Which is great when you're doing it, but when you want to come out of it, the fascia's like, oh no, this is not what we agreed to. We agreed to this, not this, right? So it's a two-way street. Your thoughts affect your posture, and your posture affects your mood. This is not the mood or the posture of a person who is either confident or energetic or engaged, right? If you walk into an interview Yeah, happy to be here. I really want this job. Really want this job. Yeah. You know, I mean, what are you sending here? You know, 90% of people's opinion of you is like that. It's not even at the level of thought. It's just in that second or two. And if they're first, you know, I mean, it's telling, right? If I'm at a party and I'm sitting over there in the corner, you know, like this, am I approachable? Do I look interesting? Would it be worth your while to, you know? But if I'm, you know, if I'm up, if I'm open, if I'm engaging, you know, more receptive, right? Yeah. So I have a mentor of mine, Stuart Bell, he used to live here in town. He's he's in his mid-70s now. And he works in San Francisco. And his work consists of helping entrepreneurs sell their ideas to capital venture, whatever they call them. What is that, capital? Venture capitalists, got it the wrong way around. Thank you very much. To sell venture capitalists their ideas, you know. So he charges like $500, you know, for a couple of hours. And they see him on a regular basis. And what he works for them to do is so that when they enter the room with a good idea, that their physical energy, that their posture reflects the confidence they have in the idea. That there's some congruency between the person, who he is, how he presents, you know, and what he's presenting. Because if that isn't there, you know, half the job, you've just failed at half the job of selling to these people. Does that, I mean, this is, people have figured this out. It's worth their while to invest money in order to make this happen. And your yoga practice, you know, will make that happen. I mean, if you really delve into it and quit thinking about it so much and just learn through the experience of it, then you can teach your experience and it will be authentic. If you teach what you've read, then you're just passing on information, right? Let's lie down. This time bring your feet beneath your knees. And I think we'll just come up into bridge pose. Yeah. So bring your feet this way a little bit. Yeah. You want your heels directly under the knees, not too close to your low back. And then no pillows for this pose. Never a pillow for bridge. I don't care how someone's neck might be, it's not going to be improved by having a pillow in bridge. So we come up into bridge. Notice that you may have flattened your neck. If so, lift your chin a little and get a neutral curve in the back of your neck. Engage the back body, back of the legs, squeeze the glutes, turn them on. Turn on your shoulder blades and lift your heart. Good, now look at your belly. And let's all breathe 3 rounds of breath and watch the belly rise up. I want to see it big and full and round. Be proud. Yes, be proud. Exhale, let it come in, just the belly. No movement in the chest. You want to isolate the belly. Yeah, figure it out. Try to keep a soft face, soft eyes, no thinking necessary. Good, everyone got a free moving belly? Yeah, everyone, that's, yay, good. Now, pull the belly into the front of the spine and take a series of breaths that are totally in and out of the cage. No belly movement at all. Look at your belly, you can see it. But let the ribs open and then squeeze the ribs. Work the intercostals. Remember, the intercostals are one of your primaries along with your diaphragm, your abdominals. So you see how you can choose where to breathe in this pose? Not hard, is it, to switch back and forth between belly and ribs? You could do both if you wanted to. Woohoo! Big day. Breathe into the belly and the ribs. Good. Now stretch out your legs and take both arms over your head, long and strong and straight. So legs straight out, arms straight over. So this tends to bring your spine into a little arch, yes? Good. So just notice that. Now, it's going to be the belly and the cage, the belly and the cage, right? So on your in-breath, focus completely on inhaling in a way that brings the whole cage up towards your head. And then as you exhale, squeeze the cage and the abs and pull the whole ribs down towards your pelvis. Yes, inhale, big, up and expand. Exhale, squeeze and pull back down. Work it. Work it. Why is that funny? Is that funny for any particular reason? No. Okay. Are we getting movement? The movement I really want you to focus on is the exhale, where the rib cage gets more narrow and it pulls down towards the pelvis. Just options. There's always options. You are in control of where and how rhythmically you breathe. Good. And then let that go. Okay, so we're going to move now. Plant your feet beneath your knees, arms by your side. Yeah, still lying down. We do a lot of lying down in my classes. So we're going to take the breath into the pit of the belly. We're going to keep inhaling into the ribs. We're going to keep inhaling into the chest. And as you do that, you naturally go into what I call a pelvic tilt. As you exhale, pull in the belly and tuck. Inhale and tilt. That's it. Exhale, tuck. Curl your sacrum away from the floor. So you've got to bend your knees and plant your feet. Yeah. So bend your knees, plant your feet. Yeah. So the inhale is a tilt. Belly, ribs, chest. Exhale is a tuck. Squeeze, 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 and curl up. Yeah, when you exhale, curl your tailbone away from the ground. Yeah, even more. Lift it, curl it up. Yeah, be proud. We're getting some movement down there, back and forth. Swinging from a back bend to a curl up. Yes? Don't be afraid to say yes. I like to get some response. Okay? So how smoothly do your hips rock back and forth? How smoothly does your low back go from flexion to extension? And can you feel this movement like a wave all the way up into your neck? Inhale the sound of the wave coming in, belly, ribs, chest, expand. Exhale, tuck, curl. Inhale, tilt, expand. Smooth, steady, ujjayi sound. Yeah, it's all throat. It's not nose sound, it's all from the throat. Do you feel free? Do you feel articulate in your spine, that every vertebra along your spine is freely undulating from the tip of the tail to the base of the skull? Do we get it? Can we feel it? Can we breathe it? Don't be afraid to be bigger. Curl up more. Okay, roll over and sit up for a minute. So, inhale. Exhale. Now I'm curling up to where your bra line might be, right? Inhale. Oops, a little stress there. Let's come up more. So this whole low back clears the ground. Let's do that. So it's the same in-breath, big tilt, belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, curl the pelvis and the low back away from the ground. Inhale, go back down, pelvic tilt. Exhale, curl up. The breath leads. The sound of the breath is your focus, and it leads the body into this motion. This is a wave. It's a big wave. Big wave. The movement ends when the breath ends. They are synchronized. It's inseparable. Good, and then take a moment. Good. So that was one in-breath, one out-breath, right? We're gonna add another in-out in the middle of those two. So it looks like this. So it's the initial inhale tilt. You're going to exhale up to around the shoulders, and then inhale into bridge. Exhale down, one vertebra at a time. Inhale, tilt. Exhale, halfway up. Inhale, all the way up. Exhale, curl down, one vertebra at a time. That's the action. It's bridge pose, but it's rolling bridge, right? Rolling bridge. Give it a try. Let's all start at the same time, and we can stay in sync at least one breath, I think. So arms by your side, shake out any tension. So same thing as we did before. Inhale, tilt, belly, ribs, chest. Exhale, curl halfway up. Keep moving, keep moving. Inhale all the way up into bridge. Exhale, curl down one vertebra at a time. Tuck and curl. Inhale, tilt, belly, ribs, chest. Ooh, you forgot the tilt, right? You got to find that, yes. Exhale, halfway up. Inhale all the way up. Exhale, curl down. Everyone forgets the tilt. Once you come down, take the in-breath, belly, ribs, chest. Now quit thinking about it and feel the wave. It's a felt experience. You feel it through the nose and throat, you feel it in your belly, ribs, and chest, and you feel it undulate the spine. And the idea is that it's one fluid, unending movement. No beginning, no end. It loses all of its compartmentalizing and just becomes a free-flowing wave. Unrestricted, each vertebra articulately moving like a slinky up and down the spine. Soft eyes, soft jaw. Get into it. I'm purposefully having you do it for some while here because there's a rhythm I want you to find, your natural rhythm. It's unhurried. It's not about effort. And we curl down. You press all the air from under the spine. Yeah, one long exhale. Just feel everything there is to feel about the breath and how it really is the breath that's inspiring this wave-like motion over your spine. Let's do another couple of rounds. And then stretch out and let that go. Now pay attention to the breath now. Watch the return towards ease. Watch how the breath finds its new rhythm. And encourage your body to let go of any past effort. Feels good, doesn't it? So for many, you may find there's 2 or 3 vertebrae at some point along your spine that are kind of stuck, that move as a chunk, you know? So this kind of movement oriented around the breath over a period of practice time, you know, can slowly start to unlock those places that may have been stuck for, you know, years even, particularly between the shoulder blades. So we're going to stay on our back, but I want you to bring your arms probably here, unless you have room for this. But if you don't have room for that, just come here. And then pick up your knees like you're sitting in a chair. Yeah. So we're going to do some twisting here with the purpose of opening the corners of the chest. So the first thing to do is to feel the width across the back from elbow to elbow, and to pull the forearms consciously into the ground. We're going to squeeze the knees together and keep them together, but we're going to put the knees in a place where we have a little lumbar curve in the low back. And we're going to tighten the corset in order to sustain that lumbar curve. So, with the intention of opening the chest, we'll take a deep breath, and as you exhale, drop your knees off to the left. And feel what happens on the right corner of your chest. You feel that stretch as you lower the weight of your legs. Inhale, come back up. Exhale across. Now the intention is not to get your knees to the floor. The intention is to keep your shoulders on the ground. Come up on the in-breath and across on the out-breath. So bring your arms down a bit lower. And because that's easy for you, now keep that shoulder, don't let it come up, not even a little bit. And inhale, come up. See, that's a little too much. Yeah, don't go to the floor. Don't worry about the floor. The floor is just an arbitrary place. Please don't strain in order to get there. You want to let the weight of the legs drop and create a chest stretch in the opposite side. You feel that? Yay, we feel that. Hopefully, someone does. When you start teaching, you will really appreciate feedback from the people on the mat. Otherwise, it tends to make you think you're just talking to yourself and they're thinking about dinner, you know? Now, go to one side.
Quick question.
Yes?
When you say corner of the chest, do you mean near the armpit or near the lower rib?
From the heart to the top of the arm, where the pec is. This front of the armpit, this thing, right here, that's your pec major right there. That's what we want to stretch. So it's underneath the breast tissue, comes from the sternum, from the ribs, comes across like that. Now, take your legs to the one side. Well, let's all go to the right side. Let's make my life easier. So go to the right side, but don't let your knees be on the floor. Squeeze your knees together. Now, is your left shoulder floating above the ground? Yes. Okay. Pull the belly in. Breathe into the left corner of the chest. Exhale, drop the shoulder. Inhale, expand the chest. Exhale, drop the shoulder. You see what's happening? Your tight chest is keeping the shoulder off the ground. Each time you inhale and you stretch that place, your shoulder can go a little bit closer. If it's stuck firm on the ground, take your feet further out. Let it come off the ground a little bit. Challenge your chest to be stretched. You feel that happening?
Yes.
Come up. Go the other side. Knees tight together. Drop to the side. Feel that stretch. That sensation of stretch, that's where you aim your inhale. Right underneath it, and you lift it up. And then you exhale and you drop the shoulder.
Yeah. Feels good.
So one breath at a time, without any other effort at all, one breath at a time, you go deeper into the pose. Now the only criteria is that your belly isn't breathing. If your belly's moving in and out, your chest isn't going to move. We've already established that, right? So you've got to successfully engage the corset. Good, come up. So that's one example of how giving the breath direction and purpose can actually take you deeper into the pose without strain or struggle. And there is supposed to be no strain or struggle in a yoga practice. Usually takes about 10 years to learn that. After 10 years of strain and struggle, you finally figure out, you know what, perhaps if I backed off a little, things would open of their own accord. You know? You ever tried telling someone what to do? You notice how they resist you? And then when you quit trying to tell them what to do, they go ahead and do it anyway, and they think it's their own idea. Right? It's kind of the same way your body. If you try to force it, it resists. If you work with it, well, it figures out it wants to, you know. So did we have that experience? Using the breath to open a particular place, right? Yes. So one of the things I often see in class, I don't teach a lot of forward folds because most people I know are in this position and the last thing they need is more claps and round. They need more Cobra, locust, bridge, back bends. In our culture, that's true 80% of the time. 80% of your classes should be more about that than this, because we do too much of that already, you know. It's just an opinion, just my opinion. So here, forward fold, seated forward fold, Paschimottanasana. This is what you usually see. People reaching, and look, I got no neck. You know, got no neck, everything's bunched up, and everything's tight. And it's just a struggle, and it's not pleasant. There's no point. Instead, bring my hands here. And if I think about the inhale coming up here, I can inhale, pull the belly in, exhale forward. So we do that a couple of times, hinging at the hip, right? And then at some point, you just allow your head to drop and your shoulders to round. So get to that place. Yeah, you're not reaching for your feet. Just pull your tummy in and curl around. Now, just tone your belly, just so it doesn't expand. And take a very deep breath into the back of your body. You feel it expand? Exhale, drop into that expanded space. Inhale, expand the back. Exhale, drop into that space. Just like you did in the twist, breathing into your chest, you're now breathing into your back. You feel it working? Good, and come up. So we all saw, you know, a pretty significant increase in our forward fold. Nothing to do with the hamstrings, right? Which is what we obsess about, you know. But we all felt an increase there, and it all come from the capacity to pull this in and to breathe into the back, exhale, drop. And the first couple of breaths you get a noticeable, expansion and drop, and then it gets a little more subtle, until there's not a lot going on, and kind of that's where you get for today, for this moment. You come out, you do something else, you go back in, and you do it again. So this promotes, the approach of, you don't have to effort. The cultural voices that tell you that you're not doing enough, you're not working hard enough, and your life would be better if only you could work harder and do more. That's a self-serving voice. It doesn't serve you. It serves others that, want to sell you something for the most part. It's not a sustainable approach. That constant pushing, the constant striving, the constant trying to get further is not a sustainable approach. And the practice really, wants to inspire, kindness and compassion towards your body. You're not trying to force it into a pose. You breathe it into a pose, If the pose is not progressing as fast as you wish, well, that's just because you have unreasonable expectations, right? You expect that, the mind thinks in nanoseconds. It decides what it wants, and it wants it now. And the body says, well, yeah, it's all right for you to say, but it's going to take some weeks, some months for this body to slowly shift from its current pattern to a more, expansive pattern. But the more you try to make it and force it, just like the more you try and force your friends to obey you, the more, it rebels. And if we can learn that lesson quickly and recognize that it is actually a lesson in patience, in sensitivity, kindness, compassion towards oneself. That's the first. Have you looked at the yamas yet? Yama, niyama? Compassion to all beings. Well, you know what they say on an airplane, Put your oxygen mask on first so you can help others. Yeah. So the compassion you bring, the patience you bring to your own body and the evolving body that you wish for, is reflective on how much you can give to other people in that way, There's just no real percentage in striving too much in a yoga practice. There just isn't, Anyway, I'm wondering. It just occurred to me to ask, given that we have worked the diaphragm in a couple of different positions, and given the nature of the diaphragm is to push the contents of the belly down in one of its movements, what would be like the most difficult pose for the diaphragm?
Plow. Plow.
I think it's hard to breathe in plow. Kind of.
Yeah, it's hard to breathe in plow because it's, you're so compressed here, but you do, you have a back body, movement there. I was thinking more in terms of inversions, because then you've got an upside down diaphragm, and it's trying to actually push all the contents of your belly right up toward the pelvic diaphragm. That's why have you noticed how difficult it is to breathe in headstand or handstand, and where you breathe, and how that awkwardness in the breath makes for an awkward, shaky pose? It's because you're upside down, and the whole diaphragm is not being helped by gravity, it's actually being hindered by the whole weight of the contents of all of your, kidneys and liver and all of the intestines and everything else, So I bring that up just to say that every time you change your shape and orientation to gravity, you change the way that your respiratory muscles, particularly your diaphragm, moves. It's challenged more inverted. It's easier when you're standing up. It's more difficult in plow. It's more difficult in Cobra and locust. We felt that, right? You know, trying to come up on an expanding belly when we're laying on the belly. So every pose offers you an opportunity to explore a different aspect of how you breathe with what you're breathing. And what is the response to that? And is it a response that's serving you? Or could you change it to a breath that, you know, did serve you? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's stand up. So, corset as stabilizer. Just step forward with your left foot. Your right foot's way back there. All toes face forward and you're off your heel. Yeah, so the heel isn't down, squared hips. And you bend your back knee and drag the mat. Now imagine that you're squeezing a block between your thighs. And turn your glutes on. And grip with your toes. Grip with all 10 toes. And float your front heel. And drop your hips a little. Now, tighten that corset. Tighten that corset. Breathe globally into your cage. Inhale the arms up. Inhale, the whole cage broadens and lifts. Exhale, squeeze the cage. The belly's stable, the corset is turned on. The legs are strong. Get your stability from the core. Good. One more breath. And then release. Good. Let's do the other side. And come back into that pose. Breathe your way into it, right? The breath leads the way. Yeah. Now engaging the corset strongly, giving the breath direction in and out of the cage, global breath. And then what happens if you just let your whole belly hang out? Yeah. I mean you feel that immediately, right? Now bring it back in. Draw it back up. Narrow the waist, expand the cage, root the shoulders and reach through straight arms. Good, good. And then release. Good. So all standing poses, the symmetrical ones, the asymmetrical ones, Trikonasana, side angle pose. Do you guys talk in Sanskrit when you talk poses? Oh, do you know what I'm saying when I speak in English? I've forgotten all that Sanskrit stuff. I never use it really in my classes, you know. My demographic are not there for, you know, Sanskrit. They're, you know. Anyway, so if I want to go into Trikonasana, the tilt of the pelvis, the corset engagement, the twist, Trikonasana is a twist, you know, and the movement through here, and the sense of keeping this up and open, tightening the corset. And here, opening up this piece, right? Rotating that piece. Corset in, breath in the cage. You breathe your way down, right? What's tight is breathed into. Once it opens, you move into that space. Let's all do Trikonasana to the left. Yeah, Trikonasana to your left. That would be your right, that would be your right, that would be your right, that would be your right. The left.
Learn that.
Your other
Have
left.
gone over that?
Your other left. Hey, as a yoga teacher, it's the hardest thing I ever do is keep the left and the right straight. Yeah. So, if you think of a pelvic tilt and you draw the corset in to maintain that little bit of tilt in the low back, and then you cut into the pose right there at the top of the thigh. That's where you initiate the movement. Let your pelvis turn in like that.
Oh, there's the pop.
Yeah. Don't lock the front knee. Never lock the knee. Do not support yourself with a locked knee. Unlock it and squeeze the muscles around the bones. Yeah. Just bring your hand forward a little and think about turning here. No, the other way. Yeah, look at that. So this turns and the arm follows. Yeah. Good, and come up. So I feel my urge to crack some things. But it's like, no, that's not this module, you know. So later on we're going to do a module for upper body, which is going to be mainly neck, shoulders, and all of that. But just, you know, real quickly here, this expectation that we're all looking at the ceiling, no, we're not. Most of us are not anywhere near ready. I'm not ready to look at the ceiling in this pose, right? I come here and we've still got so much to twist up here, but I see people trying to look up. And then their arm comes up and it's like, oh my God, do you look so uncomfortable? You know, it's like, can we not kind of, you know, open it up a little bit, even if we have to come up some. You know, we tend to think, well, I've got to take this arm back there, that looks good. Look how far back I am, you know? But it's no, you bring it here and you're trying to free and you're trying to self-support, and it's all about holding the corset strong and the spine in its natural shape, and the breath is steady, and you're self-supporting. You're not falling, but up and open. It's a glorious thing, a yoga pose. It's not suffering, you know? Most of us create suffering by going too deep too fast. And then we try to figure it out. You figure it out one breath at a time. Patience, sensitivity, sustained effort, you know? But not desperate effort, focused effort, you know? Sent to certain places. Does that make sense? It's about the approach. It's not about where you get to. It's about the approach. And if you forget your breath, wherever you get to is going to be an unhappy place. When's he going to tell me to come up so I can breathe? That's not yoga, that's abuse. No, I mean, you'd spend 10 years doing that in your yoga practice, and all your habits of bad posture and all of that are going to get worse, not better. Just because you do 10 years of yoga doesn't mean you're going to be open and free of all that. You've got to do 10 years of yoga getting rid of all the current habits and restrictions that you've brought into the room with you, and once you're free of them, then you find that expression, right? And we all come in with habits. I mean, there's at least, well, half a dozen that lock the knee. Kneecap thrown back, you know, lock in the knee.
That's what I was taught.
Sorry for whoever said that. You lock the knee and there is no need to engage muscle. You're just locking the joint, and all of the pressure and all of the intensity is going into squishing that meniscus, and it can be a nightmare. You unlock the knee and you squeeze the muscles above, you squeeze the muscles below. The muscles hold you up and the knee does not lock. This is one of the hardest things to shift as a pattern. And while you're trying to shift it, you'll be holding your breath and thinking about all the years that you've spent locking the knee.
That's interesting.
Well, they're gone, those years, so just move on. Here you are on a mat with a knee. What are you going to do with it?
Or take a slight bend in it.
Yeah, and then engage below and above it,
Oh my gosh.
right? Yeah, and it's true of everything we do. It's true of our postures, you know. You know, it's like, you know, it's like be up, be open. Practice what you want to be. We don't do yoga to get more this way, right? So why just wait for a yoga pose to try and express that? Why not just express it all the time? Right? Yeah. Yeah. Fearless. Right? It's like, and there's a recognition that, you know, you have to fake it till you make it. Right? First time you walk in front of, is anyone teaching yet? Well, the first time you walk into a yoga class and there they are, your students, all looking at you, eager and expecting. You know, you've never taught yoga. You've got to fake it. I mean, you're not yet a yoga teacher, right? You're someone who's stepping into the position and seeing if you can be a yoga teacher. Right? You know, because this is different than teaching. But my perspective is, if I can help you understand your yoga through experience, not through your intellectual capacity, but through your capacity to feel, to stay in feeling, in breathing, so that you know the practice intimately from your own experience, you will then be able to verbalize that practice and be authentic about it. But you can't tell people to take their arms up and free their neck if your neck is not free. Right? I mean, you have to model, you know, what you want to see, you know, in your students. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect by any means, you know, but the intent, you know, has to be there, you know. And when you stand in front of that class the first time, your heart's just going to be, you know, and then what do?
Breathe.
Yeah. And if you're smart, you would have gone to the bathroom 5 minutes before the class starts and be in there doing Ujjayi breath for 5 full minutes without thinking, and then walk straight into the class. Rather than be outside the door, you know, working yourself out into the wrong side of your nervous system to lead a class. Right? Because that's what we're doing. We're shifting from, you know, one side of the nervous system to the other. We're doing it on purpose, whenever we want to. And we can become very efficient at doing that. And within the space of 2 or 3 breaths, you can completely change your inner landscape. From frustrated, bored, angry, you know, jealous, you can recognize the feeling, own it, and breathe through it. And it's an amazingly useful tool. Amazing. Yes?
I just wanted to say, you have been very inspirational to me. I've heard about breathing through. I have a lot of panic attacks. I'm like, I'm all up here. But to hear you say that I could take those 5 minutes and let everything go and just breathe, because I've always thought if I'm already in a panic attack, breathing isn't going to help. But I can always feel them coming on.
Right.
So when I'm in here and I'm in here doing my mental thing and thinking I suck and all that stuff.
And you're in the corner as far away as you can be.
I think that they saved it for me today because they knew I was a little anxious.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much, because this makes sense to me, and this gives me a sense of empowerment that I can take control over something that's been harming my life for years.
Right. More power to you. Yeah. And, you know, I've had a wonderful experience with and this lady who used to be the mother-in-law to my daughter. And she was probably the most negative person I've ever met in my life. All she ever did was watch court shows and murder mysteries, and I mean, you know, all the time. And she was always deeply negative. And it was always such a strain to have to be in that company, you know. And I try to be in the other side of the room and, you know, kind of, you know, I'm always skirting wherever she is and all this. And one day I was driving there and I thought, you know, this just isn't working. It's not working for me. I don't have a good time at my daughter's place, you know. I've just got to shift this. And I just started breathing in the car. And by the time I got there, I was really calm, you know, I was like in that place. And she come in And immediately she started to talk. And I played it as a game. I kept my breath going, but whatever she said, I tried really hard to find like one positive thing about that, you know? And I would say that. And she would look at me, and then she'd say something negative, and then I would put one little positive, just like a little drip, you know, just like a little drip. And it was amazing. I don't know how it affected her, but I had a pleasant time. You know, my experience was shifted. I took charge of the experience. I took charge. I noticed my habitual reaction to being in her presence, and I didn't like it. And I thought, I can do better. She doesn't have to change. Again, you can't tell everybody what to do to make your life better, right? So you have to work from the inside out. And, you know, this practice can do that over and over again until you completely rely on it, and it becomes completely second nature. And you're driving down the road and you hear yourself doing a Ujjayi breath. You know, just because. Why not? You know, and you're just listening, you're not thinking. I have vast stretches of time where I don't think. I mean, I'm just like in awareness. Not meditating, I'm just not thinking. It's completely liberating. It is, you laugh. But it is, it's so liberating to have a quiet mind, a non-verbal state of mind. And you can use that Ujjayi breath, feeling that, making that sound, you know, putting the 4 senses on the breath, closing your eyes, and you can completely transform yourself just by shifting your perspective to that place and out of this place, you know.
Would you mind touching on the Ujjayi breath really quick? I think I may have been taught wrong. I was taught you put your tongue at the roof of your mouth and breathe through your nose the entire time. Is that wrong?
What you do with your tongue is your business. I guess my tongue is on the roof of my mouth, on the gums behind my teeth. I don't pay much attention to it. You know, it's just that subtle. It's really subtle, and it can be so subtle. I mean, you can do it on an airplane, sitting next to a stranger. They can't hear it. And I'm not so sure that I can hear it, even in my ear. I think it might just be something, you know, rattling around in my head. And I've become so, you know, muscle memory, you know. Well, we can create those memories in our breath patterns. And now whenever I create that sound, you know, I just step right into it. It's just so, after 20 years, it's so second nature, you know, to do that.
Well, now I'm doing it without my tongue on the roof of my mouth, so.
Well, I mean, it doesn't, you know, if that works for you, that's fine, but the tongue needs to not be active.
Yeah.
And it's not, you know, you're not Darth Vader, right? I mean, you don't want that. I mean, the more subtle, the better.
Okay. Thank you.
It's just an exercise to slow down how many breaths you take in a minute, and to give your mind a point of focus, an anchor for your attention. And if you just learn one thing, if you really innately get that one thing of mind on the breath, everything else will come pleasurably. And you won't waste any time in striving, struggling. You know, it's not that. It's, you know, how far can the breath take you? There's your edge, right there is your edge. Own it. You know, if your mind's not happy, well, sorry. This is your edge. There it is. Breathe. And your edge will slowly move away, right? One breath at a time. And life is so much easier. One breath at a time. Okay, let's all sit for a minute. So, let's come to a sitting position. You can just come up to a straight spine and bring your palms together. And just find a global breath in your own rib cage. You're not efforting, you're just noticing. Even a subtle breath can be global. You sense the passage of air through the nose. And the mind is quiet. There are many of us and we are not the same, but the spirit that moves you moves me and all that is. We are all living expressions of that one spirit. Namaste.